You know what's wild? The Blue Jays came into this spring training with what looked like one of the deepest pitching staffs in baseball. Like, on paper, this rotation was supposed to be a problem for every single hitter in the American League. And then, as it always does, reality decided to show up uninvited. Let's talk about what's actually happening in Dunedin right now, because there's been some movement on two of the most important arms on this roster, and if you're a Blue Jays fan, you need to hear this. Shane Bieber, the former Cy Young winner, the guy Toronto brought back because they believed he still had that elite stuff. He came into camp dealing with arm fatigue, which, look, nobody wants to hear that word combination ever, but especially not in February. The ramp-up process got delayed, and for a fan base that was already holding its breath after everything that happened last year, this was not the news anyone wanted. But here's what manager John Schneider actually said, and I want you to pay attention to the specifics here because the details matter. Schneider said Bieber is throwing and feeling good, that he's already out to 120 feet. Now, if you don't follow pitching progressions closely, 120 feet is a meaningful benchmark. That's not a guy who's sitting in a training room wondering if he can throw a baseball. That's a guy who's physically on a field, arm feeling right, building toward getting back on the mound. Schneider even said that hopefully within the next week to 2 weeks, Bieber will be getting off the mound and starting his full progression. He also mentioned there are options coming, which tells you the front office isn't panicking. They have contingency plans. They're not just crossing their fingers. And Bieber himself said something last week that I actually really respected. He said something along the lines of how he finishes the season matters more than how he starts it. That's a veteran mentality. That's a guy who's been around long enough to know that burning yourself out in March to make an opening day roster means nothing if you're on the IL by June. He's being smart about this, and honestly, given that he was always going to be on an innings restriction anyway, missing a few weeks at the start of the year might not even be the disaster it feels like on the surface. Now let's get to José Berrios, because this is where things actually get really interesting. Berrios had a complicated 2024. There was the injury, there was the playoff situation, and look, there was also just the reality that his stuff had dipped from where it was when he was one of the more reliable arms in the rotation. Toronto actually tried to move him this past offseason, and the reason they couldn't was his contract. So heading into 2025, you had a pitcher who the front office wasn't even sure they wanted, who had dealt with physical issues, and who needed to prove that he was still the guy they thought they were getting when they signed him. Based on what Schneider said this week, Berrios might actually be doing exactly that. Schneider said José is fully healthy, and then he went further than that. He said his stuff is back to where it was probably 2 years ago in terms of velocity and his breaking ball. 2 years ago. That's not a small statement. That's Schneider essentially saying the version of Berrios that was legitimately useful at the top of a rotation is the version that's showing up to work right now. And then there's this detail that I find genuinely exciting from a baseball standpoint. Berrios changed his breaking ball, made it a little bigger. He's actively trying to evolve, trying to add a new wrinkle to keep hitters off balance. Schneider said he loves seeing guys try to do that. And honestly, so do I. A pitcher who's just trying to survive on reputation is dangerous. A pitcher who's healthy and actively working to get better is a completely different story. So where does this leave the rotation as a whole? Let's be real about it. Dylan Cease is locked in. Kevin Gausman is locked in. Those two are your workhorses, your guys you can count on every fifth day. Behind them, you've got Trey Yesavage, who is stepping into his rookie year, and by all accounts looks ready for this moment. That's your top three. After that, it's going to be some combination of Berrios, Cody Ponce, and Eric Lauer filling out the back end while Bieber works his way back. Is that ideal? No. Was the preseason vision of this rotation, having Bieber healthy from day one and Francis giving you length and depth? Yeah, that was the dream. And Bowden Francis missing the entire season is a real blow because he was quietly one of the more reliable arms in that bullpen to rotation bridge role. That depth is gone now, and the Blue Jays are operating with a little less margin for error than they'd like. But here's the thing, and I genuinely mean this. When Bieber does come back healthy, this rotation has the potential to be legitimately dangerous. You're talking about Cease and Gaussman at the top, a healthy and motivated Berrios who looks like he rediscovered something, a young arm in José who's hungry to prove himself, and then Bieber sliding in when he's ready and pitching deep into the year on fresh legs. That's not a bad story. That's actually a pretty good story, if it plays out the way it's trending right now. The concern for Toronto fans has always been health and consistency from this group. Last year exposed how quickly things can unravel when your rotation gets hit with problems. The front office clearly learned from that, which is why they spent real money on Cease and brought back Bieber and restructured how they were thinking about depth. The pieces are there. The question is always execution. Right now, in late February, the signals coming out of Dunedin are more positive than negative. Bieber is progressing. Berrios looks like a different pitcher than the one who walked out of that playoff game last October. The core of the rotation is healthy and building toward the season. There's work to do, and there will probably be bumps along the way because there always are, but the foundation looks solid. Blue Jays fans have been through a lot of uncertainty over the last few years, a lot of close calls, a lot of moments where it felt like the window was either closing or hadn't fully opened yet. This year feels different in terms of the roster construction and the clarity around what this team wants to be. The pitching was supposed to be the strength heading in, and even with the early setbacks, that might still end up being true. Keep an eye on Berrios specifically over the next few weeks. If he can sustain what Schneider is describing, if the velocity is really back and that bigger breaking ball is working the way they're hoping, he becomes a genuinely valuable piece of this puzzle rather than a salary they're trying to manage. That changes the calculus on the whole rotation. That gives Schneider real options and real flexibility in how he builds his lineups and manages workloads. It's early. It's spring training. But the news is trending in the right direction. And for a team with legitimate playoff aspirations, that's exactly what you want coming out of the first week of camp.